What was I saying? Oh yeah, this is a fun fact that might surprise people. Is that so VO2 max and maximal strength are associated with longevity. I don't think I have amazing VO2 max at the moment, despite how much hockey I play, right? And this, we're talking about jogging, so people that don't do maximal strength, any weightlifting at all, and they don't really work on their VO2 max when they're jogging. So I'm going to break that down in a second, right? Because jogging to me is like you're going at between 60 and 80% energy expenditure while you're running, right? And you're doing that for like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes, right? But that's not, to me at least, from what I know about VO2 max, VO2 max is expending a lot of energy in a short amount of time, but it's more about your oxygen, how much oxygen can you process through your body? Can it transfer your oxygen throughout the part, throughout how fast and how much oxygen can you process? So that requires you to be obviously pushing yourself extremely hard because your body's like, right? So when you do a VO2 max workout, the fun thing that I always say is that it's not necessarily about how much like distance you run or even how much time you go. You should probably go for at least 2 to 4 minutes, at least, if not maybe like 8 minutes or whatever, depending on the intervals and how hard you're going. But 4 minutes is an okay starting point, I think. Like depending, I mean, 4 minutes is pretty good, I think. But I haven't been doing any of that work where you're just expending as much energy as you can, kind of, right? It's like so. Okay, so one of the exercises is for 4 minutes, try to like run as like much distance as you possibly can in 4 minutes, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So it's like you get to choose the pace that you're going, but the goal is like how far can you run, right? Like in 4 minutes, kind of thing, right? And then you rest for 4 minutes and then you do it again, something along those lines, right? When I think of jogging, that's not really what we're doing. It's like we'll go for a route, a trail that's like 30 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever, right? So if you only jog, you're not doing maximal strength. So maximal strength is some type of compound movement, like a bench press or a squat or a deadlift, and then you try to lift maximal weight for 1 or 2 reps, maybe, right? Maybe three, maybe five at most. So that's going to be maximal strength. That's maximal strength training. And then VO2 max, which I just explained. So those are the two metrics that sort of are associated with longevity. When you look at jogging, that's not really what you're doing, and you're not doing either of those really, unless you're out of shape. And when you go for a jog, like me right now, I don't do any jogging. I just skate. But the difference with skating is, at least in my experience, is a lot of like leg muscle conditioning. And when you're playing, you can kind of coast because you're skating already. I can do that. Like I can force myself into like sprinting and stuff in skating, like skating as fast as I can for an extended period of time. But like most sports, like you can kind of coast, especially in hockey, because you're coasting like sometimes, or you're not always sprinting, right? Sometimes you have to handle the puck and do other things. So like it would surprise people that I would probably admit that my VO2 max is not something that I work on a lot right now, which I should and I could work more on, but I just haven't because I just been playing a lot of hockey, right? But I should work on. So my VO2 max right now is probably not that great. I feel like relative to what it could be, obviously, right? And so going back to this talk about longevity, people that have health conditions that, and you think they're healthy, for example, someone who just jogs, and you're like, oh, they have some health conditions. I'm not saying jogging is bad and it's not healthy. It's super helpful. Obviously, if you do nothing else and just jog, that's better than doing nothing. But if the data is true, again, I'm not a scientist and maybe some of this stuff is new data, but if VO2 max and maximal strength are the metrics that are associated with longevity, or most associated with longevity, then stuff like jogging doesn't fall in any of those categories. Again, we don't know for sure. I don't know. The data, science is always changing and stuff like that. But that's what comes to mind. And then the other thing I always talk about too, which reminds me of bodybuilding, is similar, right? Bodybuilding is not about maximal strength, and there's obviously not really much cardio unless you're out of shape, right? Because bodybuilding is how big can I make my muscles. You're not, the way you're training is not how heavy can I lift. It's do anything and everything you can to make this muscle big, which usually isn't lifting as heavy as possible, doing 1 or 2 reps for like 6 sets or 5 sets, right? It's usually do 3 sets per exercise. You do multiple exercises, and each set is going to be anywhere from 6 to 12 reps. And in those reps, it's just burn the muscle, right? Like almost till failure, and then go through failure, drop the weight, and go more, so that it's like you're just tearing the muscle apart over and over. But that's obviously by then you're doing 12 at 15 reps sometimes per set. That's not maximal strength, right? You're not making yourself, unless you're in the first maybe a couple months of working out after never working out or whatever, you're not really getting stronger working out that way. The way you would get stronger, again, past a certain point of working out, is the low reps, like 1 to maximum 5 reps, and you're lifting very, 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 very heavy, right? Bodybuilders don't do that though. And then when you're lifting weights, you're obviously not really working your cardiovascular system. You're not really intaking as much oxygen as you would rather than when you're like sprinting or something like that. Therefore, I could see also bodybuilders as they age running into just statistically more problems than someone that is working on VO2 max or maximal strength, right? I'm not saying these are like the fucking answers to living longer for sure. Like these are like the all catch all, will just erase all disease and all aging stuff by just VO2 max and longevity. But I think they're worth considering based on the data that we have right now, because apparently that's what the case is that longevity, and then there's diet and all that stuff. But what a lot of scientists, again, there's so many different groups that it's hard. People are gonna, in the comments, I have no comments, but where people would obviously argue a lot is where the diet part is. But a lot of science says that it's easier to get, or like there's more benefits from just getting diet right. But like if you perfect diet past a certain point, there's diminishing gains, diminishing return, based on like, let's say you have your diet like pretty good, you get your good diet pretty good, and then going from pretty good to like amazing diet is like the difference that you're getting is not that big of a deal. It's only if you're eating like shit, then you're like, that's bad. Going from eating like shit to eating good, that's where you make the biggest gains. And the worse you eat, the worse it is, obviously, right? But going from like, you got most of your nutrients to like getting the exact amount of milligrams of the nutrients and the type of nutrients is not as big of a deal. Especially, it almost becomes again, the science, depending on who you are, the science says it almost becomes, once you're good, you have enough nutrients, it almost becomes void of which starches you're getting or which veggies you're eating or whatever, if you incorporate physical activity, like adequate physical activity. Then it's almost like you could have ice cream and white rice, and like the difference between that and like a potato or like a quinoa is like, there's a difference, of course, but it's not as profound as you might think it might be. Again, there's a difference, but it's not as profound if you're exercising adequately. But like if you look at the majority of most people on the planet are redoing those things. I myself, someone who's extremely active, I admit I don't work on my VO2 max almost at all, right? I work on a lot of skating stuff, right? Which doesn't force me to reach that VO2. Really, working on VO2 max is actually you have to be very specific with it. You have to really be like focusing on that thing, right? It's not go for a run. It's, we're going to work really fucking hard for like 5 to 15 minutes and you're going to be dead at the end. I can't just be like, oh, I'm going to work on my VO2 max and go for a nice casual skate. That's not VO2 max, right? So I admit, someone who's very healthy, that I don't even work on that stuff, right? So if you look at the rest of the world, how many people are really focusing on VO2 max and maximal strength? Plus, especially when you're lifting, most people also don't really care about maximal strength because they're not aware of the science and stuff like that, and they just want to look better, so they want bigger muscles, so they're very likely not really caring so much about maximal strength because there isn't an immediate physical difference when you work on maximal strength, right? Anyway, that's just a quick summary. Hopefully that was useful. You guys want to listen to 10 minutes of me talking?